This is the Horse Radio Network. This is episode 19 of the Stable Scoop Radio Show, Horse Sport in New Zealand. Thank you to all the listeners who have made donations to the Horse Radio Network. If you like what you hear and want to support the network and the horse programming that we do, you can make a donation by following the donation link on the left-hand border of our site at stablescoop.com. Now on with the show.
Welcome to the Stable Scoop, with weekly shows delivered right to you. With Helena and Glenn the Geek, live from the stable, it's every week. They bring you the news through hail or high water, while using their tails as their own fly swatters. So sit on down and laugh till you poop, cause it's time again for Stable Scoop. Stable Scoop. Stable Scoop. Stable Scoop.
I am Glenn the Geek.
And I'm Helena B., and this is the Stable Scoop Radio Show on the Horse Radio Network.
Hey, Helena, can you believe it's only 1 week from Christmas?
Yes, I can.
I know, and you're going on vacation, right?
First time in 5 years.
Wow, 5 years.
If I ever get out of Boston, I will be so happy.
And you just had we have people listen to this show from all over the world, where Helena lives in the Northeast, just had a huge ice storm and knocked out power to like half of 5 states.
Over 1 million customers were without power for almost 5 days, and still some don't have it back yet.
I know. My friend John there, he just got his back yesterday. He was 4.5 days without power. I think the lack of internet was causing massive withdrawal. He was...
thankfully I didn't lose any internet, which is the only problem I had was my outgoing mail server was a little bit slow. But there's this small swath of New England that didn't get covered in ice, and thankfully I was one of them. But pretty much everybody else was frozen in.
Yep, and it was a serious storm. Well, I'm very excited today because I actually think that our show today is going to warm us up a bit because I think they're in summertime now. We're going to be talking all about horse sport in New Zealand, and we have some fantastic guests lined up. And we're hoping that our electronics and our call system does not fail us as we talk to multiple people in New Zealand. So who do we have on today, Helena?
We do. You're right, Glenn. We have an exciting show planned for today. We have a special co-host joining us from New Zealand, who you will introduce in a minute. Also joining us is one of New Zealand's well-known equestrians, Colin McIntosh. Colin was a 3-day eventer turned show jumper. He competed at the Seoul Olympics and has won many prestigious show jumping titles. So we'll be talking with him. And also joining us is Jim Ellis, who is the CEO of Equestrian Sports New Zealand, and he has a similar role to our own David O'Connor in the way David heads up the USEF. Jim Ellis has likewise responsibilities as the CEO of Equestrian Sports New Zealand. So I bet he'll have lots of interesting things to talk to us about, too.
Nothing like starting at the top in our first conversation about New Zealand, huh?
Hey, we did that with the Talking Equine show. We went straight for the top with David.
It was with David, actually. So, our first show. Nothing like putting the pressure on to begin with. All right. So today we're excited to have Robin on, and she is the founder of horsetalk.co.nz, which is one of the most popular horse sites in New Zealand. Basically, if you Google New Zealand horses, her site is at the top of the listings. I think it's been around forever, and it's the go-to source for New Zealand equestrians. And she has been a supporter of the Horse Radio Network, and I have to thank her for that since the beginning, since we first started. And I'm excited to actually talk to her for the first time. There goes my cell phone. See, I didn't turn that off.
Come on, Glenn. We've been doing this for how many months now?
I know, and I forgot. All right, we're going to do that right now, so that doesn't... But she's been a supporter of ours forever. And hi, Robin, how are you?
Hi, Glenn. I'm great.
Good. See the professionalism we have here?
Yeah, she's good. We should put her on that regular co-host list.
Yeah, because obviously she probably doesn't have her cell phone on right now.
No.
Well, I do, but it's in the other room. So
good.
It's not going to bother me.
Well, we've been conversing for quite a few months now, and it's just a pleasure to finally speak with you.
You too, yes. Yes, and I'm sorry to hear the weather has been rather unimpressive there. We're having a beautiful sunny day at the moment. The sun is shining. I can look out and see the ocean where I'm sitting, and all is well.
Oh, now you're really rubbing it in.
Is it summer over there right now, Robin? What's the season?
Yes, it is summer, yes. Yes, and we're, as you know, we're a week from Christmas, and which the Northern Hemisphere people tend to be very surprised when they come to New Zealand for Christmas, because we sit and have our traditional Christmas dinner, our roast and our roast vegetables and big heavy puddings in the middle of summer with our shorts and t-shirts on.
No snow for you.
No,
that sounds
very
really
rarely.
nice. That
Yes,
sounds
it is.
really nice. I'm looking out my window and there's 3 inches of ice and crusty snow on the. Yeah, so
Well,
I wouldn't mind being in flip flops and eating my roast.
So how did horse talk get started?
Well, it got started. We just found that there was nowhere for horse news, particularly there was nowhere on the internet. The internet was really quite new to New Zealand in the mid 90s, and there was no real daily or even kind of horse news website that was New Zealand based. So we figured, well, we'll give that a try, and we host websites for studs and organisations, and then we really kicked up the daily news thing a couple of years ago. So pretty much every day we'll put news items up on the website. So we have a journalistic background, so that part is a little bit easier for us. So it's been a lot of fun over the years.
Well, and actually, yours is kind of unique because I noticed that you write a lot of the articles that go up there. You're not just regurgitating other stuff.
That's right. Yeah, Neil is who's the co-founder of Horse Talk. He is a long-time journalist and very good. He researches. We talk to people all over the world. It's really good fun. It's amazing where we can be talking to people where they are, and and he does a lot of research for our articles, and so we try and keep ahead of everything and keep up with everything. There's a lot happening in the horse world.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, too, because when I want to see what's going on in New Zealand, your site is the one I go to.
Well, that's good to hear. And also we do keep an eye on the rest of the world as well. So, keep an eye on the international horse scene on horsetalk.co.nz.
Yeah.
Do you do much traveling, Robin? Do you get to go to other countries or even traveling within New Zealand as part of your work, either in journalism or working with?
Not really. There's not really a call for it. We don't really tend to go to the larger competitions. If they're locally, yes, but it wouldn't be really worth our while to tackle the really big, the big competitions. I mean, there's just so much going on. And New Zealand is, as far as the World Equestrian Games is concerned, we are into dressage, show jumping, eventing, and endurance, whereas some of the other activities, which are like vaulting, for example, very small, and reining, very small in New Zealand. So
yeah, that was another question. Is Western riding at all, like American Western riding, is that popular at all in New Zealand?
It is popular in a few areas. It's been going for a few years, but I don't believe New Zealand operations are part of the FEI family in that regard. There are a lot of Western riding clubs. I mean, there's quite a few quarter horses and Appaloosas in the country, which are the main breeds that people do Western with, but it's not a huge thing. Not a huge thing.
I know Australia, it's popular. I think I just saw that, wasn't it an Aussie that won the reigning championships last week?
I think he might have been Austrian.
Austrian, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember which it was. But so what is the major discipline then in New Zealand? Is there one that stands out, or?
Excuse me. I would say jumping and eventing would be the main ones. But endurance is also growing fast. There's a lot of Arabian breeds. In fact, the Arabian horse has been one of the oldest breeds in the country, from the sort of late 1800s. Dressage is popular, but it does struggle because we have trouble getting very, top international trainers to the country on a regular basis because of the expense. And really and speaking of the financial side of it, New Zealand is just such a small player compared to the rest of the world with regard to, horse sport. It's just not it's not as financial as the rest of the world, put it that way.
Are you guys suffering? Are you guys suffering the same kind of financial challenges that the rest of the Western Hemisphere is, or are you feeling the impact of what's going on in the United States in your country?
Yes, the impact is here. I mean, I checked last night, and if you had $1 American dollar, $1 US dollar, you'd buy $1.70 New Zealand. Or going back the other way, if I went to the US with my $1, I'd get 58 cents.
Okay.
Yeah, so interesting.
The exchange rate has dropped dramatically. It should settle around 60 cents, we imagine, and we'll probably have to just ride that out for a few years. So that is great for people coming to New Zealand to buy horses, but not so good for us going the other way to try and compete on the world scene. So
the days of you guys coming here and enjoying that favorable dollar is not there anymore.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Not so good. Huh. So leading up to 2010 and to the Olympics beyond that, we're not sure what sort of an impact that's going to have.
It'd be interesting. We'll have to ask Jim when we have him on today, who's the head of Olympic sports there in New Zealand, what they do have planned and whether the economy is going to affect those plans.
Yes.
So we'll have to ask him that when we get him on. But I think it's time now that we actually bring Colin on. So Colin actually has been one of the leading equestrians for many, many, many years in New Zealand. His name is Colin McIntosh. He's well known down there. He's part of a prominent equestrian family. His wife and his daughter actually are very prominent equestrians as well. He started at the age of 9. He started as an eventer and then migrated to show jumping. And after focusing exclusively on show jumping, Colin has seen success in the show ring nationally and internationally. He represented New Zealand several times in international competition, including the Olympics in Seoul. He's won many prestigious show jumping titles in New Zealand, including Horse of the Year, Grand Prix Rider of the Year, New Zealand High Jump title 4 times. It just goes on and on. His resume is about 10 miles long. And he successfully produced 10 Grand Prix winners and numerous successful show jumpers and eventers. So let's say hi to Colin.
Hi, how are you?
All right, good. So we appreciate you being on the Stable Scoop radio show with us today, all about New Zealand. And I'm not sure where to start with you because your resume is about 10 miles long. I was reading your website, and I've never seen such a long resume of people who've done so many things. Now, you started out as an eventer and then switched to show jumping. So my first question, being in an eventing family, is why'd you do that?
Well, there was a number of reasons. At the time in New Zealand, eventing was kind of a fledgling sport. It didn't have the recognition that it does now. And the opportunities to compete weren't as prolific as they are now. You got like 1 or 2 events a year, and I managed to get in the team to go to Australia when I was about 18. And after that, your horses have to have such a downtime, and there was a number of reasons. The lack of horsepower and being able to compete regularly. Show jumping offers you a bit more of that opportunity.
Are you still competing, or you do mostly coaching and training now?
I'm doing mostly coaching and training, but I still do compete. I actually have an Australian horse in the barn at the moment that I ride at, about the middle level, and he's only a youngster. He's only 7, so so I'm still doing a fair chunk. I still really enjoy it. I'm still competitive. We win a few classes here and there, so it's still great. Good.
And does your wife still compete?
Yep, Tony has a Grand Prix horse. We have an Argentinian Grand Prix horse, so she competes in the Grand Prix and mostly in the Northern Californian circuit. We have about 40 horses in training with us, so we're on the road around 30 weeks of the year with clients at horse shows.
Wow.
So, it's a busy life, so we fit our competition kind of effort fits into the big picture of all of that.
Now, Colin, you're based in California now, is that correct?
Yeah, in Woodside, California, Northern California, just about 40 minutes south of San Francisco.
And how often do you get back to New Zealand, or do you get there much at all?
We try to get there at least once a year, and we generally try to work it so that we get to a horse show. We actually were back in September and didn't make it to a horse show the year before we managed to get the Tauranga World Cup qualifying round, kind of keep ourselves informed of what's happening in New Zealand and catch up with family. It's just fitting it into the timetable, really.
Right. And what do you find is the greatest difference between being a horseman in New Zealand and being a horseman in the United States, particularly in California? Do you notice a difference?
There's a huge difference. I mean, the whole equine environment here is so much, it's on another level in terms of the competition, but in terms of the horsemanship, which you talked about, I think New Zealanders have a definite edge in terms of horsemanship. We're in a facility where Pete Breakwell, who's, from Hastings, has been here for years. He's in the same facility as us with his business. There's Guy Thomas is just up the road. Rachel York is not far away from us. New Zealanders have a great reputation because of their horsemanship. There's the handling and managing and training of the horses. That's kind of, I guess, in our opinion, a little lacking in America. There's great competitors here, but it's hard to find great horsemen or horsewomen.
What's New Zealand focused on now? We talked a little bit to Robin about this. Is it mostly show jumping and eventing are the big things in New Zealand?
The wide variety of equestrian sports are all very popular. I mean, if you follow the New Zealand web pages, you'll see that the endurance riders are doing well internationally. There's, I think it's fair to say, a resurgence in eventing with Vaughan Jeffries coming back on board and Mark Todd doing his thing again. I mean, that's been an enormous boost for eventing. Show jumping's always been very focused. We have a large group of international competitors, outside of the New Zealand group that are very good, but we have New Zealanders dotted around the world, and in my selection capacity I try to keep track with as many of them as possible, and we have an ongoing effort at the high level of show jumping.
Now you're a selector for show jumping?
That's correct, yes.
So you'll be involved in the selection for the 2010 games?
Well, I hope so. I think the process in New Zealand is under review after Hong Kong, and the High Performance Committee is under review. Mr. Ellis can probably tell you a little more about that. And the selectors are up for renewal. Prior to that, our contract was basically till the end of Hong Kong, and there's a new criteria being set for selection. But I'm still available for it. I have a great interest in supporting New Zealand equestrian efforts. We've been involved in every aspect of it, as you said earlier, and via our webpage you can see that we've run shows, we've been on teams, we've been on executive committee, and we have, the very best interests of New Zealand show jumping at heart, although we live in California now.
Well, now, Robin, you had a question, I think, about Samantha, right?
Yes. She's changed back to Kiwi nationality, which is great.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. Actually, I was talking to Samantha this morning. She's in Spain at the moment at a horse show in Spain, and she gets back just a few days before Christmas back to her base in northern Germany.
We probably should. We probably should say that. We probably should explain to everybody who Samantha is. Samantha is Colin's daughter, who's actually been riding in Europe, right?
That's correct. She's been there about 11 years, and she's previously been riding for Bulgaria, which was an interesting turn. It was an opportunity to ride internationally and do the European. So she.
That's not a country you think of as a place you want to go ride.
No, but they have, they have an equestrian interest there, and the military have been supportive of it for a number of years. And it was a great opportunity for Samantha because it allowed her to get into the top European competitions. It got her going in Europe. And now she feels, that she's established and she has this yearning to ride for New Zealand again. She did represent New Zealand as a young rider, in her early teens, and it's just something. Kiwis are very loyal to their country, and this morning she said, she's looking forward to having a go at getting on the World Championship team in 2010. She has 3 horses down with her in Spain that are very promising jumpers, so. Yeah, so we're very excited about her being able to ride back for New Zealand, and obviously it's great to have another McIntosh riding internationally.
Now, when she did, was there any controversy in her getting back, or was it a no-brainer?
No, it isn't actually that simple. You've got to have a stand-down period. Like, she has 18 months. She actually can't ride in an international competition for New Zealand or for Bulgaria until, I think, June of 2010, so not that far prior to. There's a stand-down period of about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. And it is a bit of a process. You have to present a case to the FEI to get you to change nationality. So it is a bit of a process. And she had thought about doing it before and put it in a too hard basket, but just this seemed the opportunity to do it now.
Well, that's quite a decision then. If you have to stand down for 18 months, then that is a major commitment.
Well, one of the things she said this morning was that she no longer can compete in the European Championships, and she's been very successful at the European Championships, finishing in the top few the time she's ridden there. So that's a competition that she won't be able to go, to. And she said, well, the thing is that if you do the Europeans, you have either a World Champions or Olympic European that gives you, one a year, and it's almost too much for the horses. So,
right.
So she's focused on the World Champs at the moment if she has a horse. But I think she has no desire to go there unless she can be competitive, unlike a few people that kind of feel that getting there is the achievement. She has a wish to be successful there as well. So, so we've got our fingers crossed that her horses will be good enough at the time and it'll all work out.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit for a minute and ask you about your training philosophy. I was reading on your website the mission and the vision that you have for McIntosh Stables, and one of the things I found very interesting was your mission. Basically, it says that you hope to inspire the mastery of equestrian sport through a safe and positive training experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think is a positive training experience, and what are your top two goals? Like, how do you achieve a positive training experience?
Gosh, how much time have we got? This is my pet subject. When Tony and I were training in New Zealand, we had already developed a very positive coaching approach. And so, in other words, trying to find the things that people, competitors, riders, and their horses did positively and enhance that rather than totally concentrate on the negatives of what was happening. And when we moved to America, we very quickly became associated with a group here called the Positive Coaching Alliance, and they do a lot with youth sport in schools along the same lines that, one of the objectives of sport is, obviously the safe environment, but to try and create an enthusiasm that's lifelong. And so many people get a negative experience from coaches in particular. In their efforts to improve, they concentrate too much on the negatives and not enough on the positives, the things that people can do and do well. So it was great when we met them. They actually had formalized what we'd been attempting to do for a number of years. So it was great, and it was a boost to us. And we had some meetings with them, and they took on board some of our suggestions because of the involvement of the equine athlete. And generally it takes the stress out of it for us as coaches. It takes the stress out of it for our clients, and it certainly relieves a lot of the stress in the training process for the horses as well. So it works great for us, and we've been spreading it around, and I've been very heartened to notice at the horse shows we go to in California that there's a number of established coaches that have picked up on some of our terminology and some of our approach and are using it successfully. So, we're really enthusiastic about that whole process. The old kind of rugby room, locker room, negative, yelling and screaming and getting upset with people and being derogatory really doesn't work in the 21st century, if it ever worked at all.
No, I've been on the wrong side of that approach myself. That doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Well, as coaches, we continue to grow. We're on a learning process the whole time, and even though we've been doing it for many, many years, we still take every opportunity to learn from others. There's a few great mentors here. Obviously, George Morris is one of the greatest jumper coaches ever. We spend time with him at a few shows when we meet. Bernie Trag, we still have contacts in Europe. We have a very open mind to new thoughts, and there are some things happening in equine sport that's not so attractive, so we try to stay in the more positive side of everything, and it kind of works for us anyway.
I can't tell you how happy I am to hear that. It's just you see so much of the other side of it, and because I think that side of it is usually publicized.
Right. And particularly in the show ring, or in a competitive environment.
Right.
Well, I think one of the things is that amongst the talented people, it's disappointing to see, and I can talk about this, I think that the use of stimulants, illegal drugs in horses is, an unnecessary thing, I think, in a proper training program where people's ambitions are realistic given the talents of their horses. And that's something that we vehemently, strongly speak out against. And we, in our barn and business, never advocate that at all. In fact, it's something we're, strongly against. And I think it's something that the sport really needs to take a good, strong look at in terms of the end result at the international level.
So having had so much success within your own family and your horses and your students, how would you define success outside of a competitive environment between a horse and rider? For those who want to achieve the same level of technical riding ability and horsemanship, but who don't have either the ability or the means or the desire to have their horsemanship validated in a competitive way. How do you define a success outside of that?
Well, that's a tricky one. I think it depends on the individual. We have clients that are not competitive that we still strive to achieve some of the same goals as we do with our competitive riders, and that is that they enjoy their horse, they do it in a safe environment, that their horse enjoys the interaction with its owner or rider. There's a number of ways you could measure that success. I just think just loving doing what you're doing, just going out and enjoying it and having a horse that's stress-free and enjoying what it's doing kind of isn't as successful as winning a class. We train on a regular training process, but it doesn't always end up in the ring, and even when it does end up in the ring, it doesn't always end up in blue ribbons as it is here, not red like in New Zealand. So people have to, the people that are riding, the competitors and the clients have to have some enjoyment from, a process of success, which means, okay, they're teaching their horse something new, they're feeling more comfortable, more secure, more confident. They're just, enjoying their association with their horse other than winning classes. Winning classes is awesome, and we're all very competitive about it, but at the end of the day, in every class can only be one winner. So in a class, a Grand Prix of 70-odd people, you could say, well, okay, there's going to be 69 disappointed ones if the only thing that they get pleasure from is winning. So there's numerous ways that success can be measured, and we try to do it on an individual basis. We sit down and have goal-setting meetings with all of our clients and work through a process to try and help them achieve whatever it is their goal is, whether it be going to the Olympics or just feeling safe on a trail ride.
That's great. And you know what? We're already running out of time here, Colin, but I did want to ask Robin, do you have any other questions for Colin before we let him go?
Yeah. Are there any hot-looking prospects for the 2010 games thus far that you've seen with your selector hat on, if you do come to be a selector?
Well, the horse turnover is fairly high in the show jumping world. Peter Breakwell has a wonderful young Grand Prix horse that's had enormous success in the Futures Grand Prix, and I think it's been featured in the bulletin a couple of times. Rachel York has a really nice Grand Prix horse that's also had success. Guy Thomas has a horse he calls Peterbilt, which I think is an 8-year-old this year. It's a stallion. Also, a great international prospect. And I know the guys in Europe are working really, really hard on their horsepower. It goes without saying that we have some awesome riders. We have riders with super talent spread all around the world, but the horsepower is the issue. And so those young and up-and-coming horses are the future of the show jumping, and I guess the same could be said across the discipline. So, yeah, I'm very excited. There's some very nice horses out there, and people are getting the right idea about what kind of horse will do the job now.
Yep.
And I heard there's some girl named Samantha that might have a shot, too.
Yeah, well, Sam, I'm obviously very biased there, but Sam has, she has a couple of really nice 7- and 8-year-olds that are competing well. She won a metre 45 class in Portugal last week. That's been featured on the webpage, NZEF webpage, or ENZEF, whatever. So she has lots going on all the time, and she seems to be able to find a superstar when she needs it. And the reports I get from Europe and from her is that she has a couple of really nice horses. So fingers crossed.
Good. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll have to get her on the show here sometime.
I talked to her about that this morning, and she'd be more than happy to do it.
Oh, great.
She's on the road a lot, and she's a New Zealander. She wants to promote the sport for New Zealand. She wants to be involved and make a contribution.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're just going to have to schedule a McIntosh episode with all three of you.
Yeah. Well, there is always an outside. I haven't given up throwing a good Grand Prix horse into the ring either if one came along. Who knows? We might have a whole group of us in a team sometime. That would be awesome.
That'd be cool.
We'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, great.
Hey, we always try and end with one question for all the top riders, and the question is, you've done so much, what is the one thing that stood out in your career that you're the most proud of?
Well, I think representing New Zealand in two sports in the three-day event and the show jumping, but the Seoul Olympics was an awesome achievement. New Zealand hadn't been to an Olympics in 20-odd years when we went, and that performance, I think our team performance there is still our best ever. That was an outstanding. I mean, there's so many things, winning the Horse of the Year and other titles, but I think, for me, just being able to contribute to the whole thing has been an awesome experience, being able to be on committees, be able to give back some of what I've taken from the sport. That's why I'm still a selector now. I feel I have something to offer, and it's nice if people give back.
Well, that's
something.
great. I'll tell you what, we appreciate you being on, but unfortunately we're already out of time, and we have to talk to Jim or he'll be mad at us. We do appreciate you being on, and we'll get you, I was serious about that. Sometime next year we'll definitely have to have a McIntosh episode and work it out to get you all three on at the same time.
That'd be great. You might ask Jim how he's going to restructure the High Performance Committee, because that's the million-dollar question at the moment.
Oh, we'll let Robin ask that. So.
Okay. Listen, thanks for having me on. I really
all right, Colin.
it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Take care.
bye. Bye.
Our next guest is Jim Ellis, who is the CEO of Equestrian Sports New Zealand, which is like the United States Equestrian Federation. And we're thrilled to have Jim on with us today to tell us what's happening in New Zealand. Hi, Jim.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Okay, we certainly appreciate you being on the show with us, and it's early there in the morning, I think.
Oh, yeah, we're just about 10 to 9 in the morning on a gloriously sunny summer's day.
See, he's rubbing it in too,
again,
Helena. I know. Here we go. Robin made sure to rub that in earlier, too. Hey, I'll tell you what, we have so many questions for you in so little time, I don't even know where to begin. I just wanted to, give everybody, we have listeners from all over the world here. And I want to just give a little bit of background on yourself, maybe the Reader's Digest version. You started in this position a year ago, right?
Yeah, just over a year, about 15, 16 months.
And what did you do before that?
I used to work in the previous to that, the British and then the New Zealand equivalent to the NCAA.
Oh, really? Okay.
Maybe you could tell us what Equestrian Sports New Zealand is and what its function is.
And I think just very much the national federation within New Zealand, and a very similar role to that which is provided by the, NS around the globe. I think what's probably important to be clear about in New Zealand is that we are a single organisation, so we obviously run the four disciplines that we do underneath one umbrella, but legally we're a single entity, and I know in many places around the world those separate disciplines are still run as separate organisations.
Okay, so it would be like the United States Equestrian Federation here.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. And we are formally constituted to look after dressage and endurance and eventing and show jumping, and literally our board made a decision last week to incorporate para-equestrian as a fifth discipline of our organisation.
Oh, good. Okay, that's great. Now tell us, as I said, we have listeners all over the world. So to start our conversation, tell us what you would like those listeners all over the world to know about New Zealand horse sports.
I think that the key bit, and Robin will be able to back me up on this, is about the scale. The scale of horse sport in this country is significant, and I think partly our place on the globe means that as a country, and certainly in terms of our southern hemisphere location, sometimes we struggle to fit in exactly the way that the northern hemisphere find it slightly more easy to. But horse sports is significant here. Within the country, there's a population of 4 million in New Zealand. And it has a very rich...
we have about 100,000 horses in New Zealand, according to a couple of different sources. 80 to 120,000 is the range of horse population in New Zealand at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. I'm probably around 30% of those would be part of the racing industry. And certainly, I think within our category of horse sport, we would say that we register probably between 15 to 17,000 horses at our level. But in terms of pony clubs, then clearly you can take that much further. So I think we probably represent, again, maybe a third of the total equine population in New Zealand. But it is a very horsey country. Clearly, it's got a very well established sort of rural background. But I think one of the big challenges for us, and in particular our sort of our training, is how the I guess the urbanization of our population. There's an awful lot of people who are coming into the sport who don't have a natural heritage and natural opportunities to train. So.
When we think of New Zealand here in the United States, obviously we've seen some very famous eventers and things, and a lot of them end up, well, like Colin for that. See, I'm going to get back at Colin for wanting us to ask you all the tough questions. A lot of them seem to leave. Is that just a misperception for me, or do they end up coming to the United States? Is it because it's easier?
I mean, it's true. I mean, obviously, it's fairly discipline specific, but an awful lot of our top end athletes do believe that they need to leave the Southern Hemisphere to go and prove themselves and to be competing at an appropriate level. And it's certainly currently we've got 25 eventers in the UK. If we were to look at our premier show jumpers, there was certainly one of our show jumping team at the Hong Kong Olympics who was New Zealand based, and the rest were either based in the States or Europe. I think our premier dressage rider is based in the UK. So certainly it is true that there is a tendency for New Zealanders to leave New Zealand and head to the Northern Hemisphere.
But they are. I'm sorry, they are still representing the country, right? Even though they're living abroad, they're still riding and representing New Zealand.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and I think we have to be realistic about where the heartlands are of international horse sport. I think certainly within our programs that they're very much catered for the fact that people will be going overseas. I think we're starting to see occasionally, certainly on the eventing side, when I talk about 25 eventers in the UK, how many of those have gone too early is certainly a pertinent question. Whether they could still be receiving the same degree of benefit to their sort of elite performance from still staying in New Zealand and doing competitions in New Zealand and Australia. And that's something that we're certainly working on here. But I think at some stage, if people are going to crack the big time, I think that there is an expectation that people will go overseas.
And, that's an economic thing, I'm sure. And we just actually touched with Robin a little bit earlier, but we didn't go into great detail. How is the economy the economy, obviously, everybody knows how the economy is in the United States. Is it the same in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think a few degrees smaller probably, but yes, but in general, I think we find we get the same knock-ons that come from downturns in sort of the American economy and the Japanese economy. New Zealand is still primarily driven by its agricultural sector and its tourism sector. And the agricultural sector over the last few years has been doing well. There's a sort of a slight downturn at the moment, but I still think that is a reasonably strong sector within this country. Tourism is clearly affected by jet fuel prices and the spend that people have in their pockets. So I think that is having an effect. But I think I don't know quite what Robin's views were on it, but I think if you walk around the streets here at Christmas time, I don't think you would get the impression you're in the middle of a huge global slump. I think there's still a reasonable degree of positivity, but people are probably just battening down the hatches a bit.
Okay, so one of the things that we always talk about here in the United States is the price of hay. So what's a bale of hay cost in New Zealand?
Oh, well, there's a question for a man who's stuck in an office in the middle of Wellington, nowhere near any horses. So, I might rapidly defer that to Robin for some assistance. So.
Well, I can tell you it does vary greatly through the country, and there are drought and is coming into a drought in certain areas. But I can tell you it costs about $2.50 to make a bale of hay. And it costs, at the moment, around the Canterbury area, it is about $6 to buy a bale of hay. This is a small conventional bale of hay, not a large
Which would bale. Be, what, about $4 our U.S. dollars at this point?
Maybe what?
Because we're 60 cents on the dollar, I think, now. Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
But once things get a little bit tighter through the summer, it's probably going to go up to around $10.
Yeah.
And that's just meadow hay. Lucerne or alfalfa hay, we call it lucerne here, is going to be like $10, $12 now, and that's going to go up even more. So the sky's the limit if you're growing hay.
It's actually not that different than here in the United States then. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
So, Robin, Colin had a question that he wanted you to ask Jim, remember?
Now that's mean. Yes, Colin was asking about the restructuring of the high performance program, how that is going to be restructured post Olympics.
That's that's a very fair question, and literally part of our firefighting during the week has been a sort of exercise in trying to get a significant message out around where this organisation wishes to take our high performance program. And I think one of the clear things that came out of the Olympics is that on a global level we are slipping slightly, and I talked specifically about eventing there, but I think certainly our show jumping campaign wasn't as good as we would wished. There are aspects of our dressage which are getting better, but also aspects where we feel further off the pace when we look at what some of the Australians are doing very close to us. And part of the review that we did, and it was a fairly swift process post Hong Kong, was to say, are we leading the program properly as the National Federation? And I think all the comments that we got was that wasn't the case, and that there was a clear degree of a sort of a leadership void, a bit of a vacuum that was tended to be filled by, I suppose, an awful lot of, I guess, a lack of direction to the riders, and the riders therefore really choosing their own courses, and the riders were screaming out post Hong Kong for increased direction in what they ought to be doing. And I think that's really what we're in the process of trying to put in place at the moment, to say we as the National Federation are going to lead this high performance program. We've just received news of our sort of governmental funding for the next year. And
I actually read that article, and it looked like it was kind of disappointing in a way, in that you guys actually, let's explain too this, you get money from the government for sports, for the Olympics, and for international events. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be a reasonably standard model globally in terms of government sport agencies putting funds into high performance.
But they actually dictate which sports. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So previously we used to receive funding 2 or 3 years ago for all of our disciplines high performance programs, and that was reduced in 2008 to just eventing and show jumping. And I think, putting it bluntly, as a result of our show jumping performance in Hong Kong and some other sports in New Zealand as well have suffered the same fate, we're now at a stage where they're saying these funds are for eventing, which is where they believe we have the ability to sort of make an impact on the top level in Kentucky and then on to London in particular.
Which is kind of sad, because it takes it away from the place where you probably need it the most, which is to develop those other sports.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean that's a completely fair point. And I think here the actual pot of money that's available is so small. I think that they've got themselves backed into a corner where they can only fund now on the basis of, if you perform well, we'll continue to fund you. If you stop performing, you're gone. And there's a real issue within that around, whether you want to call it chicken and egg or horse and cart. They've very clearly laid out their position that if you perform, you'll continue to get dollars. And if you stop performing, in the same way that our women's field hockey and women's basketball programs have essentially been cut in the same way. But what that means is, I guess, we have to sort of redouble our efforts and be particularly clever in how we maintain some form of show jumping high performance program, in the same way that we've been doing now with dressage and endurance for the last couple of years.
Okay, so what do you hope to send to the World Equestrian Games in my hometown, by the way, Lexington, Kentucky? What do you hope to send to the Games as far as teams are concerned?
I would suspect, as a result of some of the changes that we're making, that the teams that we send will be perhaps smaller than we might have been talking about a year ago. So I think at this stage we'll be disappointed if we're not coming with a full eventing team, but that's not guaranteed. I'd have an expectation of a dressage combination, one or two jumping combinations, and perhaps similar in the endurance side and the para-equestrian side. But I think what's clear for us is that we will set certain benchmark targets, which we will try and get a degree of equivalency across those 5 disciplines that we're involved in. And if people don't make that standard, we're not going to send people to Kentucky just to make up a team.
Right.
And I think that's quite a sea change for us. And in some ways, Kentucky is going to be the most magnificent games, and there's a huge degree of excitement within this country and a huge number of people who are planning to travel. But at the same time, it's probably a little bit of a line in the sand in our high performance program to be able to say, no, we're not going to fill these spots. You will be there as an individual on merit, and if it then happens that we have teams in these various events, so be it. And I think that's a little bit of an ongoing challenge for us just here at the moment. So we're trying to sort of potentially cut off our nose and not spite our face.
Right. So how much time does that particular topic take up in your workday, and what other things are at the top of your to-do list for 2009?
High performance dominates at the moment, just because I think some of the changes that we're trying to put through are relatively radical in terms of it's almost about a fundamental culture shift in rider attitudes, actually, and trying to get back to a stage where we had a couple of decades ago of a real belief and will to win that New Zealand has had. Beyond that, I think we have all sorts of ongoing administrative issues. One of the things which might sound minor, but which is a huge one for us is our new database in this office that we have here. And anybody who's dealt with significant IT projects know that these things never work in the way that you want.
Helena and I don't know anything about that. We don't.
And they never end.
Yeah, well, you're talking to two geeks here, so we understand.
They never end, and they never cost what they say they're going to cost.
That's right. They always cost 10 times what they say.
Yeah, so well, we're absolutely in the middle of that at the moment. There's an awful lot of issues at the moment around new FEI rules. And of course, they tend to come in on the 1st of January, which is very much a date set to, I suppose, allow a little bit of leeway for Northern Hemisphere in generally the start of their main season. But clearly, it tends to hit us in the middle of our season. So there's always quite a lot of work around how that gets integrated. There's a lot of other sort of development work going on with FEI at the moment. Around the sort of perception of it being a very Eurocentric organisation. So there's, I guess, some attempts at politicking and trying to make it clear that both Australia and New Zealand, being on the sort of bottom of the world, are still decent-sized players in this game. And I guess just the general day-to-day stuff of us being halfway through a season and looking forward to our very large Horse of the Year show in 3 months' time. And we currently have our second biggest jumping show going on at the moment, which we call the Christmas Classic. It takes place as our National Equestrian Centre in Taupo, which is in the middle of the North Island. And that's got 700 horses, which are just about to start competing over the course of the next.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, sounds cool. Hey, Robin, I'm going to give you the last shot of a question here for Jim.
Oh. Okay.
See, it happened to her. She got so engrossed in listening to the conversation.
That happens to Helene all the time. She gets to listening and then forgets to ask questions.
Yes, that's exactly how I am. You've caught me on the spot. Hey, Jim, with the para equestrian being introduced to World Games, into New Zealand for the World Games, how many riders do you think we'll be able to send? Will we have a full team?
I would suspect not, but I think if we could get 2 to 3 of our top para equestrians to Kentucky, I think we'd have made some real strides. And I think and doing that in a format where they feel part of our overarching high performance team, and we've been able to really support them properly. Certainly, there's quite a heartland of para equestrian from the area in the country that Robin comes from, and I think they've been operating a bit on an ad hoc basis over the course of the last 2 to 3 years. And we've just tried to provide them a real sort of firm platform to say, okay, you are as important to us as any of our other disciplines. Clearly, an awful lot of the classes and shows that they'll deliver, I guess primarily dressage at the moment, will need to be delivered through our ordinary dressage discipline. But we need to be really sort of seen to be an inclusive organisation, and that will have benefits all the way through, riders coming out and riding for the disabled, and even just through Pony Club, where there are people with disabilities who perhaps aren't even sort of being recognised at the moment.
Well, great. I'll tell you what, we appreciate you being on. Unfortunately, we are just plain running out of time. I knew that when we did a show about New Zealand and with the interesting people we had on, it would go by quickly, and it did. One thing I wanted to ask you is, will you come? We also do a show called the 2010 Radio Show, which actually Robin carries on her website, which is all about the WEG, the World Equestrian Games here in Lexington. Will you come on again with me sometime next year, and we'll talk more about that as you make more final plans?
We'd be absolutely delighted to, Glenn, and it's probably worth saying, having been recently at the FEI General Assembly and meeting some of the WEG team who are presenting there, I think, as I said, there was a huge degree of excitement. Our own annual general meeting last September, we played a DVD from one of our endurance couples who'd been and visited. And there is a real significant degree of excitement that this is going to be a magnificent event, and certainly seeing some of the facilities and the stadiums being built, and I guess some of them are starting to head towards completion. It's going to be a magnificent spectacle.
We're excited to have you. I live about 3 miles from the horse park, so we're definitely excited to have everybody, and we're counting on those tourists showing up with all their dollars too.
Yeah, it will. So if the Kiwi dollar keeps plunging the way it is at the moment, it'll be an expensive trip for people. But I suspect it won't stop too many of them.
I'm thinking a trip for Helene and I to visit you guys is in order here, as the dollar keeps rising against yours. I'm sort of liking this.
How long does summer last?
You'll be very welcome. Well, summer tends to last pretty much till the first week of April, and then very rapidly ends. I think the autumn period tends to be relatively short, and we have a fairly long spring. But,
all right, so you can hook us up with the trail ride if we come down there.
Oh, we would, without any question.
Okay. All right, Jim. Thanks a lot. We appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was great. I could talk to him forever. We could just talk forever. This is a great subject. We're going to have to touch on New Zealand again because we're just having so much fun here. And I tell you what, there's some fun coming up in March too, isn't there, Helena?
There is. This winter, Shadow Lane Farm in Wagner, South Carolina, will host the first ever Aiken Eventing Camp. That's going to be held February 1st through the 6th.
I said March. I guess it's February.
Doesn't matter. February, March, it's winter.
Okay. All right, that's
it all runs together.
And it's warm where they'll be. So
it is warm where they'll be, right? And that's in Wagner, South Carolina, which is just outside of Aiken. So they're going to host. Shadow Lane Farm will host the first ever Aiken Eventing Camp. Again, that's February 1st through the 6th of 2009. Organizer Sarah Heffron and her team have put together a great week of training and instruction with top horsemen and women, including Allison Springer, Craig Thompson, Abigail Lufkin, and Dr. Christiana Ober, among others. The camp's emphasis will be on honing skills both on and off the horse's back to compete successfully. So hosted in the thick of Aiken's winter eventing schedule, even though winter isn't so bad down there, the camp is going to blend lessons, demonstrations, lectures, and educational activities, culminating in the opportunity to compete at local horse trials, which is very cool. In addition, participants will enjoy top-notch facilities, gourmet meals, and great company. Everyone is looking forward to a fun week. So that's the Aiken Eventing Camp, February 1 through 6, 2009. And for more information, you can go to www.craigthompsoneventing.com.
Well, that sounds like fun. The only thing that would make that better is if it was in New Zealand.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be pretty nice in Aiken, so winters are definitely tolerable down there.
Well, Robin, we appreciate you joining us for this show and for coming on. And I, as I said, I encourage everybody to go to horsetalk.co.nz. For all kinds of international, she doesn't just cover New Zealand, she covers everything, and they write good articles, and there's a lot going on there at the site. I assume, do you ride?
Yes, I do. I've ridden for a very long time.
And what kind of riding?
English riding, I've been a show jumper over the years. At the moment, I am in between competition horses, and I have several young horses that I'm just bringing on.
Now, trail riding, I assume you were talking about endurance. Do you have a problem in New Zealand with space? In other words, is there still plenty of wide open space to ride?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a population of 4 million in the country, with I think something like 3 million in the North Island and 1 million in the South, with around 500,000 centred around the main city in the South Island. But everywhere else, it's pretty much lots of open land, and there are loads of trail riding and trekking facilities where you can go for a day ride or even up to 2 weeks. Some operators will take you on a trail ride over the countryside.
Wow, Helena, we're just going to have to go. That's all there is to it, right?
Yeah. You will.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be interesting for people to know. It is quite, as Colin said, it is quite a totally different scene in New Zealand to the likes of the States and most other places in the world with regard to horses. About probably more than 90% of the horses in New Zealand are kept on pasture year round. I mean, they're not kept in a barn situation. Not many people keep their horses in livery or, with a trainer. You'd have your own land with your horses on them, or you would lease or graze a paddock somewhere and keep your horse there. So, we're pretty much DIY here.
Wow. It sounds nice, and you see pictures of New Zealand, and you talk to people that have been there, and it is definitely their favorite trip of all time. We should actually write to the New Zealand Tourist Bureau about carrying this show, because we certainly have been fawning over it, and I just can't wait to go.
You should be paid for it.
I know. We should actually be sponsored for this show. Make money, Helena. That would be a new idea for us.
Yes, novel.
All right, Robin, we appreciate you being on. I want to mention to everybody that we'll be back next week. Our show will actually be on the 23rd next week, and it is our Christmas episode, which basically is just Helena and I sitting around chatting. We have really nothing planned at all except to enjoy the holiday and sit around and talk. So I don't know if that sounds boring or not, but we're going to have fun doing it. You can find our show notes with all the links for today's shows to Colin's stable and to the association there in New Zealand, and you can find those at stablescoop.com for this episode, the New Zealand episode, and you can send us a voicemail at 270-803-0025 or email us with any comments at geeks, Geeks, at horseradionetwork.com. So thanks again, Robin. Thank you, Helena. And Helena, we'll see you again next week for our Christmas episode.
Yep, we'll be back with the scoop.